Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Get Your Popcorn podcast. This is a special bonus episode. I thought it would be fun to do an interview with my dad, just to kind of get some background information on my initial love in film and from the man that taught me most of the foundation of all the things I know about film and how to watch it and how to watch it in a way that brings a greater level of understanding than just for entertainment value. So following is a very special bonus episode with my dad, Mike Moroz. This feels very weird to do an interview with you. I don't know why this is so much more pressure than a regular conversation.
Well, because I'm your dad, of
This
course.
is this is
There's
true.
always so much more pressure.
No, and it's easy to talk out into space, knowing that you might listen, than to actually have you like listen in my eyes.
Intently, I might
Yeah,
add.
yeah, it's uncomfortable. Okay. So do you want to tell everybody about your background in film and theater?
Uh, sure, yeah. I grew up in on a farm in a outside of a small town, and never really sort of felt like I had a lot of connection to things that were happening in the community. Um, and then one year we had a teacher arrive at our school, which was just sort of stuck in the middle of a bunch of farms. A teacher arrived at our school who was a theater teacher who introduced me to theater as an activity. And I absolutely loved it because it was an opportunity to kind of um, be creative and stretch out and imagine different circumstances, not just things, being able to see those things or read about those things, but being able to do those things um, as a character in a show. And I was just enthralled by it. And from about the time I was, I don't know, 13, it was absolutely the thing I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Um, And so when I graduated from high school, I went to the local college, enrolled in the theater program, which I loved. Um, but, because I was young and thought I knew everything, quit and went to work to try and work as an actor, which was successful some days and less successful other days. Um, and then eventually I had to make the decision about what I did, whether or not it was something I could actually pursue as a full time occupation. Um, and at the time, I didn't think I was able to do that. So when I wound up going back to finish my education degree, I took some theater classes to round that out so that that was teachable, and then spent a long time as a theater teacher. Um, and along the way, continued to act in local theater. I kept an agent, or got an agent, and auditioned for things around Vancouver Island where I was living. Um, and it was great. I started doing a little screenwriting, developed a filmmaking class as part of the school programming. Um, yeah, and I've really tried very much to be involved as much as I can in both film and theater over the course of my entire life.
And I think you should tell the story of the missed opportunity that we can blame Madeline for.
It's not necessary to blame Madeline for that. It was a decision I made. So, as I was auditioning for things, high school students are funny. They're always skeptical, particularly theater students, because theater and film is so cool. They assume that if you could actually do any of those things, if you had any insight into them, you'd be off doing them. You wouldn't be at high school teaching them. So as I say, I kept an agent and auditioned as much as I could. And at one point, I actually secured a role in an early Chris Nolan film, Insomnia, that was being filmed on Vancouver Island. Um, I got a part, was set to go, um, and then the production was delayed. and then it was delayed a second time. And finally, when the schedule was set and kind of locked in, my agent phoned and said, "Look, here's the start date for the film. You need to be on set on this day." And it turned out that that day was exactly the due date of my youngest child. And so I hesitated for a moment, and I said, "Look, I can't go. If that's the start date, then I can't go." And there was dead silence on the other end of the phone. And then she replied with, "It's Al Pacino. You know that, right?" And I said, "Yeah, but unless Al's going to let me sleep on his couch for the rest of my adult life, I can't do this. I have to be here for the birth of my child." Um, and it wasn't very long after that, so I didn't take the part. And it wasn't very long after that my agent actually dropped me. I went for a while with no agent at all. So, yes, that's my story of a brush with greatness.
Not worth it. Madeline would understand now as an adult, I
Uh,
think.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean it was a pretty good cast. It was Al Pacino, it was Hilary Swank, it was Robin Williams.
If it was
It
Al
would have
Pacino by
been
himself, you should have done it. Just Al
well,
Pacino. Just
yeah,
him.
yeah, okay,
No other actors.
okay. Well,
It's Michael Corleone and you missed it.
I did, I did, I did.
My favorite actor of all time.
Yes, you've mentioned that.
All time. I think I've said it almost every episode of the podcast thus far. I don't know if I'll stop.
No, probably not.
Yeah, but he's 80, 83, 84, and like when he dies, I'm gonna be emotionally unwell, and I've never met him. But
Yeah, these things happen.
Been preparing in my head that eventually there's a finite number of new movies I'm gonna get. Okay. Do you remember? Do you remember when you first found a love of movies that you thought was like different than the way that your peers perceived them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I certainly came to movies really, really early. My grandparents lived in town, and my grandmother worked a lot of different places around town, had different jobs. But one of the ones that I really loved was uh, when I was quite little. Um, she worked at the movie theater, which was right next door to their house. And so when we were, staying over with my grandparents, we would get to go if Grandma had to work. We would get to go to the movies with her, sit in the front row, box of popcorn, some licorice, and see whatever was on. And sometimes the movies were great, and sometimes they weren't. Um, but we got to go, and it was an adventure. It was a real escape, and so that was a huge part of my childhood. And then a little later, when I was a teenager, I would spend summers in town, so that I could get odd jobs and make a little money in the summer. Um, and so I could go to the theater whenever I wanted, and it was super liberating. I'm not sure at the point at which I realized I looked at films a little bit differently than some of my peers are. I was looking for different things than my peers, but it might overlap actually with sort of discovering a love for theater and a love for storytelling in that kind of way. Uh, you know, um, I suspect that's sort of where that happened. Starting to analyze stories as a performer, starting to think about story construction, starting to think about that kind of portion of filmmaking. Uh, quite separate from just simple adventure and escapism. And that's probably where I started to veer off from some of my peers. Yeah.
Did you find, like, I know for me, like, I found that really isolating, being more creative and then having a love for film that was not, not just going to like a blockbuster movie or looking at film as entertainment. Like I know when I was, especially in like middle school and high school, where that's not really talked about as much. Like I found it really quite isolating. And I mean, still do. It was part of the reason that I started the podcast in general, is just to talk about movies because I don't have anyone, also being in a really small town. Like creative people for the most part export out of here. And then you're left with people who that just isn't their like area of interest. Did you find that as well?
I don't know that I would have isolated it in relation to that. I certainly was aware that I probably was not going to spend my adult life living in a rural community. Um, but it was for a whole range of reasons, and my personal interest in storytelling or in creative arts was amongst the reasons, but not sort of isolated on its own. Yeah, there were lots of reasons that I relocated from the town I grew up in. My dad used to joke. He said, if that boy can't do it from the couch, he's probably not going to do it. Which I was kind of offended by at the time, but now it's hysterically funny, right? And it wasn't inaccurate. That
Yeah.
was really, really kind of where I spent a lot of my time for sure.
Is there a movie, like, is there a specific movie that you remember that made you think, "Oh, this is different than what I've seen. This is what films are supposed to be." Like for me, is The Godfather was when it changed what I thought being a movie, like the capability of film was the first Godfather movie. I think I was maybe 12 when I watched that. 11. Too early, Dad.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
Uh, too early, but I remember watching The Godfather and being like, "Oh, this isn't like other films. This is special." Or maybe Gone with the Wind, but not in that same level. I just don't think that it has the same impact that The Godfather does. But for me, it's that. Do you have
mm.
anything specific?
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of escapism, predominantly for me early. And I think the first movie that I recall going, wow, this is fundamentally different than anything else I'd seen before, I actually had to sneak into. Um, and it was, maybe surprisingly, it was Saturday Night Fever. Um, I wasn't old enough to go to the movie, but we were away at a drama festival, and we arrived the night before the festival started. And to kill some time, we went to the movies. Um, and I wasn't old enough to go into it.
You were
Uh,
like 16
I
probably that
yeah,
came
yeah, you
out?
needed to be 16, and I wasn't yet.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I bought a ticket for Corvette Summer or something, which is a terrible movie. Don't bother to see it. And then snuck in after the doors closed. Snuck into Saturday Night Fever, and it was fundamentally different than most of what I'd seen. I mean, we had a lot of the stuff that I saw was pretty generic in a sense. We had two television channels, and there were movies on all the time. But because it was public television or was television, it was all pretty tame. There was no risk that anything was going to at any level offend anyone. Um, so going to see Saturday Night Fever and see that story and see the way it was constructed um, was was certainly very different than anything I'd seen before, and kind of shaped a little bit of, okay, this is kind of cool. Um, you know, I do remember another one that really had a lasting impact. I remember probably being 12 or 13, like you were with The Godfather, and seeing Hitchcock's The Birds on television, and that was like, holy cow! I'd never seen anything.
Well, you're also really afraid of birds, so that
Now
probably.
there's that, but the structure of it, I mean, the long silences. There's that terrific scene, Tippi Hedren leaning against the fence, waiting for the school to let out. smoking a cigarette, and then behind her, the 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 playground equipment starts to fill up one by one with birds. And so the audience, over the course of a minute and a half or whatever it is takes to fill that shot, knows that there's danger lurking, but Tippi Hedren doesn't.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, that kind of shot construction, that structure was fascinating to me, as terrifying as the idea was. Um,
And this is why you need to go see Nosferatu, because
yeah,
Robert
I'm,
Eggers,
I'm on it.
it's masterfully crafted,
Yeah, I'm on
including
it.
use of silence.
The other one that I really profoundly changed me, and at this point I was trying to be an actor, was Peter Weir's Gallipoli, which I saw 1980, fall of 1980, 81 maybe. Um, an Australian film that was astonishingly well crafted. Must have seen it, 15 times during its original run, and I couldn't, for the life of me, understand why Canadian films couldn't deliver at that kind of level. And it really caused me to then seek out a lot of other, not just foreign films, but independent films as well, to see how else stories were being constructed, what else was possible.
Who are your favorite actors?
Lots, right? I mean, big fan of of film across the whole range of eras, right? So, I mean, it's impossible to say you're a film buff and not love actors like Jimmy Stewart or James Cagney, Bogart, Katharine Hepburn, Ingrid Bergman, Cary Grant. I mean, just classic kinds of actors, that really made me in a deep way kind of fall in love with film. But then as I got older and I started to get into to acting, I started to become attracted to uh, different kinds of performers that were a bit more raw, a bit less polished. Um, that they were a bit more flawed as characters and as human beings. And, I mean, people like Brando or Montgomery Clift, Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep, right? Pacino, De Niro, right? The whole list of them. Paul Newman, Jack Lemmon, Sidney Poitier, right? Right. Just fantastic performers who brought a different style, a different kind of understanding to the work. Very attracted to that. And, we're living in a time now where there are um, tons of great actors, right? Denzel Washington, Jodie Foster, Ralph Fiennes, DiCaprio, Jude Law, Hilary Swank. I mean, they're outstanding. They're really outstanding. We've got tons of talent, um, around us. But I'm a little frustrated, I guess, with the fact that studios don't want to make anything that isn't a for sure thing, right? There are fewer chances on cool scripts being taken by studios, and so those performers, in lots of ways, aren't able to kind of show off in the way that they used to. Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, what's a line from Sunset Boulevard? Norma Desmond, who who snaps back at the reporter. He says, "You used to be big," and she says, "I am big. It's the movies that got small."
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. You're not seeing the same level, and I mean, it's part of the reason I haven't really watched the Academy Awards since like 2015, 2014. I think the last big year for me for movies was the year that like Django and Silver Linings Playbook that came out in the same. They came out in the same year. That was a big year, and then I watched in 2019 when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out. Oh, Wolf of Wall Street was the same year as those movies too. And then I haven't watched anything because I haven't found anything really post pandemic other than two films this year with Wicked and Nosferatu. Other than that, and I mean, I guess Nosferatu is technically a remake, but I feel like it's fine when it's been 100 years and now you're using sound.
Fair enough.
There's more story to tell now that you can speak words on camera.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For
But
sure.
like for the most part, like there just hasn't been anything like I love going to the theater, and I'm so excited when I go, and I just hasn't been anything hasn't been worth it to me to go and see. Or Barbie, I guess I really liked Barbie, which could have been really stupid like Transformers, but was amazing.
Yeah, and there are lots of opportunities. There's still some great things that are happening, but you have to scramble a little bit to find them. And I do find I'm not as satisfied. There's some, in fairness to some of the streaming services, there are some things that they're sponsoring that are showing up online that are spectacular little films, but the experience of seeing it on the small screen is not the same as seeing it on the big screen in the presence of a lot of people, right? I mean, there is that shared experience that really kind of heightens how a film can feel to you. The idea that you're going to go be moved by something in a movie theater with 200 other people, and as you experience that feeling, that they're all feeling it at the same time too, and that's also deeply satisfying, and it's not something that translates obviously to the small screen.
No, and that's like with Barbie. Like I went and it was like the middle of the afternoon on like a Tuesday, but there's like unspoken rule that all the women were going to wear pink. And I saw little 5-year-old girls in pink. I saw old ladies who probably played with original Barbie and they were all in pink. Like it was an entire theater full of women all dressed in pink. And then when we went and saw Wicked, it was like you could tell anybody going to see that movie because they were in pink or green, or they were standing with friends in pink and green, and you just knew that that was some theater kid that's been excited to see this since 2003.
Yeah,
And you just
yeah,
don't get that with streaming, and you don't get the scope of the movie on the
yeah, for
screen.
sure.
Like on your TV or you're watching on your computer, you're not going to get all parts of the film.
Yeah, yeah. We just saw. I missed it when it was in the theaters. Conclave,
Mm.
um, which we watched through a streaming service, and the film's great, but it's astonishingly beautiful in the way it's shot as well, and the scope of that on the big screen with the storyline would have made it even stronger, left a stronger impression.
Well, that's my favorite thing about the Cineplex and their classic film series. Like this year, I got to go see Gone with the Wind as intended on the big screen.
Mhm.
And I've saying the. Did you and I go see The Godfather 1 and 2? Or did I go on my own?
No, it could well have been us. I mean, I've seen it so often. I have to confess I've lost track of where all I've seen it.
And we saw All About Eve, like going and seeing some
Yeah,
of those movies the way they should be seen in the
yeah.
theater. Okay, who are your? Oh, it's gonna be a similar question, but who are your favorite directors, and is there anybody up and coming that you're interested in their work now?
Ah, wow. And that's a good question. So I sort of lean towards directors who focus everything in the film at the service of the story itself, right? Like I don't want to see it on screen if it doesn't advance the story in a meaningful kind of way. Um, the story is paramount, um, and sometimes directors decide that because they can do some things, they can insert a chase scene, they can have a fight sequence, they can layer the screen in blood because it's a thing they can do, but somehow that makes the film better. And I'm not always sure that's the case, right?
You can just come right out and say that you hate Quentin Tarantino. You don't need to put it in.
No, I'm going to dance around that for a little while. Um, but he's not alone, right? And I understand how challenging that is. I understand how challenging it is. That's the all of the projects I've been involved with. It's always a question of, do you think we have enough story here? What do we need to do to strengthen this, to extend it? Um, so I understand that sometimes in desperation or frustration that things are added that don't necessarily move the story along, but they're going to have some appeal on their own, and that's hard work. So for me, the directors I like the best are always the ones that keep the story right at the core of absolutely everything, and that all of their decisions are based around whether or not what they're doing serves that. I mean, so Spielberg, Scorsese, Hitchcock, Kubrick, right? Billy Wilder, Kurosawa out of Japan, Coppola, David Lean, right? They
Coppola
all.
has three good movies.
Sorry.
He has three good movies,
Well,
and they're all from the 70s.
okay. Well, and see, here's why this podcast is so great, because we're able to have a civilized discussion about
Have
what
you
we like and what we don't like.
have you seen Dracula? Like he's trying for everything but the story.
Okay, there you go. See, you see how hard it is to do that. So,
Oh
but
no, I talk a lot of shit for someone that's never directed or acted in a film on this podcast.
see, there's a lot of other directors that are trying, but occasionally don't get it quite right. Like I love Tim Burton as a rule, but he doesn't always get it right. There's sometimes stuff there that you go, yeah, you didn't need that.
Well, his
Maybe,
problem is he's done too many films in rapid succession that he's become like a caricature version of himself and
maybe,
a bad parody of himself. Where you're like, just take 5 years off, man,
yeah.
and then come back.
Yeah, I mean, and Ridley Scott's in the same boat. Mostly I like the Coen brothers. Sometimes I don't. Right?
Mhm,
but they're all trying to do cool things. They're trying to change the form a little bit and tell the story in a slightly different way. And certainly, I'm always going to celebrate that. Um,
mhm.
so, but there's lots of great stuff going on.
What was it like experiencing films you love again with your children?
Yeah, it was great. Like, I mean, there's nothing better than as a parent getting to share something that you love with your kid. Like, that's the quintessential parent activity is passing something you love on to your child, right? In a sense, it's a continuation of who you are. Um, so, sitting down and watching films, talking about films, watching you process the material, whether you're getting into it or not getting into it. There's nothing better than that. And truthfully, I have to tell you, there, points where in fact you would disagree, that you didn't like that character, or you didn't like that movie, or there was something about it that was unsatisfying for you. Uh, you know, it once the shock to the parent system, where we're right about everything and you're not. Once that wears off, it's really pretty cool to then be
Mhm.
challenged about something you love by one of your children. So no, it's incredible, and I was pretty lucky too. I didn't have to convince you. Didn't have to work very hard to convince you that crawling under a blanket and watching a movie was a great idea.
No. When did you believe that sorry, when did you notice that I had a love of movies that was a little bit different than most people or closer to yours?
That's a good question. Yeah, um, that is a really good question. I mean, you were pretty quick to embrace the activity of cuddling in and watching a movie. And you were pretty small. I mean, we went on the run, of course, of all of the classic Disney stuff, all of the Christmas movies. That was all there. Um, you liked really early. You liked silent movies, like things like Chaplin and so on when we played them as well. Um, and you went to a theater movie pretty early too. I think the Tigger movie was your first movie or amongst your first. Um, and so, and you loved it. You
I was like,
absolutely,
I think two, they came out in 99, so I was like two or three.
yeah, yeah. Sat through the whole thing was not a problem, right? So it was pretty amazing. So I mean, certainly there's some signals that you were pushing in the direction of having that be one of the things that you loved. And then as you got older, you started to kind of set your own pace. You would see something that you liked, and you'd come back and want to talk about it, or you'd seen it at a friend's house, and you had some things that you wanted to say about it once you got home, and really started to explore things a bit more on your own without me, which is pretty cool, right? Um, and it's always a challenge to know exactly what that pivot point is, but yeah, it was pretty clear early that you're a fan of film generally. Um, yeah, and it was pretty fun to watch.
And when did you believe my taste in movies became good, or do you still not think that? Because I like Tarantino and Scarface.
This is such a loaded question. there's no there's no possible right answer to this question. Like this is
You're hoping my taste becomes good one day.
no, that's not it at all. No, no. And again, I mean, I could disagree with you about something and not think your taste sucks. Right? It's not black and white in that sort of sense. It is, in fact, a sliding scale of what you like and don't like.
I still like good directors. I just have a small blind spot if Pacino's in the film.
No, and that's okay, right? That's just
Yeah, I think I like, I don't know. There's something about like a campy violence that I just like.
yep, yep,
And I can, both those films have it.
yep.
Or, I mean, Tarantino's films, I mean, I don't like Kill Bill or Grindhouse, but, and Scarface certainly has it too, where it's just like, you're like, this is intentionally over the top.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And occasionally there are things that you go, I don't know why I like this movie or why I'm laughing at this, right? I I still laugh at the Three Stooges, and I really, really, there's no reason for me to do so, and
Or
yet
The
I do
Jerk.
it, right? So,
You think The Jerk is so funny. Actually, I referenced that last night when I was talking with Owen. He was talking about the cans on the side of the railing because the father-in-law had brought back the bin that we put them in. Yep. And they were like falling over, and I was like, "The cans! He hates the cans!" And Owen didn't know what I
exactly,
was
right?
talking
Yeah,
about.
exactly. The jerk, right? So, yeah, yeah. So, no, it's not about good taste or bad taste. It's about what was appealing to you at the time, and in fact, I've I've watched movies when I was younger, and then tried to go back to them and remembered them, thinking they were great, and then gone back and seen them after 20 years, 25 years, and go, holy cow, this thing sucks. I can't
That's always
believe that
exciting.
I love that, right? So yeah, it's not good taste or bad taste. It's where you're at the moment, and how is this speaking to you today?
Is there anything I've recommended over the years that you didn't think you were gonna like and you were surprised you liked?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, lots of stuff. Um, the I'm now at an age though that reaching back and connecting the dots between what you recommended to me and what you didn't is is a bit of a struggle for sure. But lots of stuff. Yeah. No, you've recommended a lot of great movies.
All right, so we're gonna end the interview with the questions that James Lipton does on the inside the actor's studio,
I love that.
done by Bernard Pivot. What's your favorite word?
Magic. Magic is my favorite word.
What's your least favorite word?
Mortgage.
Mortgage. What's your favorite curse word?
Oh, it's got to be the F bomb. It's just its sheer versatility.
Yeah, you can apply it in a lot of situations.
Yes, you
It's
can.
great. What sound or noise do you love?
Laughing generally, but children laughing very specifically.
What sound or noise do you hate?
I taught high school for a long time. I hate whining.
That's true. That's doesn't apply just to high school. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I always wanted to be a reporter, like a foreign correspondent. That sounded to me like it might be fun, or certainly very interesting.
And what profession other than your own would you not like to attempt?
Undertaker.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You're early. Your room's not ready.
Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with my dad and I about his development into his love of filmmaking and theater, our opinions on a few things. I hope it gave a little more understanding into why I ended up developing a love of film. And I wanted to end the session with the Inside the Actor Studio questionnaire because that's sort of an inside thing for my dad and I. We used to watch that show all the time. It was hosted by James Lipton and it aired in sort of the through the 2000s and I think 2017, something like that. He passed away a few years ago, the guy that hosted it. But he would have celebrities, mostly actors and directors, come on and talk about their life and career and acting and some of the choices they've made and their opinions on the craft, and we watched that together. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to do the questionnaire that they do at the end of every one of those episodes. So this was just a special bonus episode. The regular episode will be dropped on Thursday. We'll be doing The Godfather, so stay tuned for that.